it's an opportunity we have as 21st century Armenian diaspora communities in many places to connect more with each other. We also can connect more with the other cultures through the Armenian diaspora, because as I say that often for the travel guide, when you are Armenian or I'm French of Armenian origin or French Armenian, and you have Romanian Armenians, you have Argentinian Armenians or Lebanese Armenians. If I go, just to understand, like my project was something that went slowly, but after a lot of experiences. And just to say one interesting story, where I was visiting Argentina in Buenos Aires, and I contacted two local Armenians through friends, whatever. So they invite me, we have a coffee, we talk, and then they're like, it was a couple, and they say, you know what, we're getting married on Saturday, come to the wedding. And I was
very Armenian.
So I went to an Armenian wedding in Buenos Aires through this Armenian connection. But what was interesting is that the wedding was not as much Armenian as you could imagine. It was a pure local Latin American Argentinian wedding, you know, so with the Latino music and even the food. You had a bit of Armenian things, but not that much. So the good thing about how we can see our Armenianness, our Armenian identity in the 21st century is that we have to see it as a passport for the world and not just as a closed box or something where you have to be exactly inside. It's really, if I was just like as a French guy, I would go to Buenos Aires. I could go to Buenos Aires, do the same kind of vacation. I would just stay in the hostel with the Dutch and the Germans, and I would just like do the touristic things. But because I knew local Armenians, I got into not just the local Armenian culture, but the local culture for real. So it's a very interesting tourism in this concept of Armenian diaspora is a very interesting and cool thing, and I want to develop it with these projects.
Yeah, for those who weren't here yesterday, because we had a panel about the Armenian identity, because the Armenian identity is especially in the diaspora, because just as a fact, Armenia has around 3 million people living in Armenia. And the Armenian population around the world is around 10 to 11 million, which means we have around 7 to 8 million Armenians living abroad, which means that our identity as a nation is slightly more complicated than just the Armenian identity of a nation that has its own homeland. For example, for me, when I go to Armenia, they say, oh, you're Armenian from Romania. Your Spurk means diaspora. Hai means Armenian in Armenian. So you say, oh, you're a Spurka Hai. You're a Romana Hai. And I say, okay. And then I come here because my family arrived in Romania after the first Armenia-Azerbaijan war in the 90s. Here I'm considered Armenian from Armenia. So when I come to Romania, I'm an Armenian from Armenia. When I go to Armenia, I'm an Armenian from Romania. So sometimes our identity can be very intricate. And sometimes, because the next question was gonna be, how did you discover your Armenianness? Because yesterday we were talking about the fact that you learned Armenian at a later age. Because for me, my Armenianness was, I was taken out of my homeland where everything seemed normal and we were talking Armenian and everything. And then we were just dragged and dropped here by our family because we were kids and we didn't have a choice. And suddenly I didn't know the language. I didn't understand anything. And at home we were being told, you have to speak Romanian at home because you're going to go to kindergarten and to school and you're not going to be able to actually integrate properly. So we were speaking Romanian at home. And once we started speaking enough Romanian, our parents realized that we're slowly talking too much Romanian. So the switch went on and they were like, once we arrived home from school, the conversation was like, if we hear one more word in Romanian, you're punished. So we're like, can you please decide, is it we speak Romanian or Armenian? We're just kids and we're trying to have fun. So for me, discovering my Armenianness was from the point where I realized that I'm slowly embracing the Romanian culture and language. And I realized that I had to do something to not lose my Armenianness, because our language is so complicated and we have so many letters and sounds that we produce. For example, we have two types of R. We have R and R. The soft R, which is my name's Hrant. If you don't actually pronounce it since you're born and you don't hear it at home, it's going to be very hard to pronounce. We have kids that are Armenian and they're born here, and some of them cannot pronounce R. Or for example, make the difference between Ch and R, which may seem the same, but for us, they're not. And Ch and J, we have a letter for each sound that we make. So yeah, it was when we were not allowed to speak Romanian at home, that's when I realized that, oh, okay, being Armenian means putting in some effort. So how was your discovery of your language?
Yeah, Armenianness and language might be two different things. I think it's true for Romania also, and it's very true for France. My generation is so my father's family came after the genocide to France, so it's been like 100 years almost there in France, and my mom is from France, so she's not Armenian. So when you had all this generation, you can also compare it with Armenians that arrived in Romania back then. So when you've spent 100 years in the countries, and also like France, or you could have countries like Lebanon, where it was already a very how do you say, confessional? Yeah, it was a confessional system. So it was, anyway, you are arriving as Armenians, but I will not merge you into something, because we are already having the Maronites and the Greek Orthodox and the Greek Catholics and the Muslim Shia and the Muslim Sunni and the Druze, and so it was just another one was added, the Armenians, into the Lebanese puzzle. France or Romania, it was different, because you're arriving, and in different ways, but it was more about, okay, now you have to speak the language of the country, and you will be slowly integrated into the country. So you have few cases, I think, in Romania or in France, of older generations where the language was passed over for 2 or 3 generations, usually after, especially back then. Today it might be different, because we have much more tools, and also we have much more tolerant societies and tools to keep the language, just like having the possibility of having books coming from Armenia, very simple things, and very societal changes too. So in our case, Armenianness and language was a bit different, because language, we almost all, and I talk about a lot of people, because it's probably like at least 200,000 or 300,000 French people that have Armenian descent from back then, plus the ones that came later. But from just the genocide, you have like, maybe at least 200,000 people. None of them will have the language from the 20s until now passed over all the generations. It was forbidden to speak it in the school. It was forbidden to have an Armenian school for a long time. It was and it was very kind of not well seen. You had to speak French. So I think after some time, now we have the Armenianness was separated from the language. The language, it was, we lost it, we can't do it, we don't have the schools, we don't have, the first Armenian schools in France, it's recent, it's like day school, it's 70s, I think, or 80s, and even they were very small. But Armenianness was different, because as a diaspora Armenians, we had something that was passed over. I cannot really tell what, but it's more or less the same things in all families. We all had an Ararat painting in the main in the living room. Most of them, we kept the Armenian names, either as the father's name if we keep it, or if it's the mother that's Armenian, we know it's our mother that's having an Armenian. Like, you knew by the name, by the Ararat painting, by the food, by a few things. Even if we lost things, we knew that was something that has to be continued. And then we had the specific case of France that you can compare with the US, but maybe not that much with Romania, or like Argentina, for example, if you compare everything. We had an influx of new waves of Armenians arriving in the 70s, when the communities in France, like my family from the 20s, were kind of assimilating and not having the means to keep the culture and everything. We had an influx of Armenians from Lebanon, from Syria, from Iran, later from Armenia, and that made kind of, the institutions were kept because of that. So that's something that kind of specificity in France. So in my journey, when I was I think I was 17, and my uncle was like, okay, I'm telling my father I take the kids to Armenia. My uncle has never been to Armenia. My father has never been to Armenia. No one speaks Armenian. It's like, and he was, I'll take your kids to Armenia. And my father was, okay, whatever, if you want. Kids, do you want to go to Armenia? And with my brother, we say, okay, yeah, let's go. And then I kind of had this feeling that I was connecting with something, touching something. We knew we were Armenians. It's not like we didn't know, but it's not discovering Armenianness, but it was putting a land on it, putting a language, hearing the language and everything. And then after that, I decided to go back to Armenia for 3 summers in a row and learning the language, and I learned Armenian in Armenia. And I think that's how it started. And then it, just to shortly, so understanding the way it was after having this first contact with Armenia, I studied international relations at the university, and I worked for French embassies. And I worked 1 year in Syria and 2 years in Russia, in Moscow. So I was, as a French Armenian, to me, my Armenian experience was, I talked with a few guys from Romania here, and it was almost the same thing. Armenian experience is something very local, and to me it was the same. So then I discovered in Syria, Lebanon, the Armenians there, and then in Russia, and I was also discovering a diversity that was unexpected to me. I thought that more or less these Armenians would be like my aunt and my uncle, not at all. I mean, it's let's say Lebanon and Syria might have some cultural links, but Russia, or when I went from Yerevan to Tbilisi to visit, you have another diaspora world that was opening. So that's how slowly through work I was in countries where I was exposed to other Armenian diaspora realities, that I decided to create something that I would have loved to have. When I arrived in Lebanon the first time, you arrive in Beirut, I heard of Burj Hamoud, that's the Armenian neighborhood, but you arrive there, you have nothing. Like, there is no map about Burj Hamoud, there is no book, nothing where I can say, okay, there are 5 churches, this is the story of each, you have 5 restaurants, this is where you have a good lahmacun. No, you don't have any of this. So I wish everywhere, as a non-local Armenian arriving in Moscow, arriving in Beirut or whatever, I could have just, as a travel guide, as the regular Lonely Planet guy you have for when you visit Italy, but having it for Armenians. So that's a bit the story, and I don't know how, if we go more towards with the questions, the project, the book, or my experience as an Armenian, I don't know, but it's a bit
I think you mentioned something interesting, because I think we as a community here also struggle with the language, and we do have a Sunday school that functions for Western Armenian and Eastern Armenian, because we have 2 dialects. Imagine having to learn 2 dialects. And for me, I'm an Eastern dialect speaker. When we were kids and we've arrived here, although we've learned the language and we knew the language, it was the first contact with the Western dialect, and it was weird, because I remember going home as a kid and was saying, before attending the Eastern Armenian courses here at Sunday school, we went to a Western Armenian course here in Bucharest at the school, and my first impression was like, but they were not speaking Armenian. How am I going to learn that? So I went home, and that's when I discovered first that there isn't only one dialect of the Armenian language. We have 2, and the local people here are speaking the Western dialect, like the majority of the diaspora does. I see that we have Mr. Varujan Voskanyan joining us here at the panel. He's the president of the Union of Armenians of Romania. So, Mr. Voskanyan, if you want to add anything to what we have said till now about dialects and language, feel free to.
I remember I opened an Armenian Sunday school in Bucharest in 1979 with a very distinguished lady, Anaid, Digin Anaid, and we started to teach Western Armenian, but unlike my younger friend Hrant, when I was for the first time in Armenia. It was in 91 in September, during the referendum about independence. I didn't have any trouble to understand Eastern Armenian. It's very interesting that for them, for the inhabitants of Soviet Armenia, for them it was a problem to understand me. But for me, it was not any problem. But it's, you know, what is interesting, very interesting in the Armenian diaspora, I visited practically all the communities in the world, excepting maybe community in Iraq or Australia. When I've met Armenians from abroad, let's say from Argentina, from Los Angeles, from London, we communicated like living in the same neighborhood, like we lived in the same childhood, and we had the same traditions, the same expressions. It was very much in common. Practically we were rooted practically in the same place. When I asked to somebody, from where are you? They don't answer, I'm from Lebanon or I'm from Jordan. No, I'm from Erzurum, I'm from Constantinople, I'm from Aleppo, I'm from Adana, because in a way we remain there in our motherland. We never left our motherland from Eastern Anatolia. Something in our consciousness, in our awareness, is there in Anatolia. This is the reason why this large community is practically the same motherland spread across the world. And this is the reason why we remained united, because something in our soul is practically belong to the same place, to the same traditions. There is a large brotherhood in all the planet, and the capacity of the Armenians to create communities, it's a miracle. You can imagine a tree in a landscape. The tree is alone in the landscape, but practically the tree is not alone, because through its roots the tree communicates with all the trees in the world. There is a large forest of trees communicating by phreatic water downside. This is the destiny of Armenians. We will not find an alone Armenian. I know there is an Armenian in Congo, or it's another one in Singapore. They created a small church. They created a small community, despite the fact that in Congo is only one Armenian. But because he feels it's himself part of a large community across the world, he has the power to remain Armenian and to promote his identity. And there is another thing very interesting about Armenians. They are the communities receiving them express their sympathy toward Armenians. They don't feel that Armenians are enemies. They feel that Armenians are loyal to the community they are located now. When I was member of the cabinet, member of the government, I was Minister for Economy and Finance, I kept always on my desk the Armenian flag, a small Armenian flag. And some visitors, ambassadors, they asked me, Mr. Vosganian, you're member of the Romanian government. Nobody asked you why you keep the flag of another state here on your desk. And I answered, no, because in Romania, Romanians trust us. They know that Armenians are very loyal to the country they exist now. And I have to express all my sympathy for Romanians and for Romanian land, because in all the difficult times for Armenians, they opened their harbors, they opened their frontier, and they accept the Armenian refugees here in Romania. In 12th century, when the Armenians came here pushed by Tatars during the genocide, Romania was the first country recognizing the Armenian genocide. Romania was the first country establishing diplomatic relations with the new Armenian state in December 91. And I can say that this place, Romania, for us is a blessed place, and this is the reason why the community exists. We have now 1,000 years of continuous existence here in Romania. Maybe in Venice or in Marseille, Armenians went before coming in Romania in 6th or 7th century. But in Romania, we have the oldest Armenian community in Europe, taking into account the continuous existence. Thank you. And I congratulate you for this guide. This is not a touristic guide. This is a spiritual one.
Now that's very true actually. Just one anecdote, because that's exactly I like the idea of the phreatic nap, but my grandma was cooking very well Armenian dishes, and she passed away when I was 15. And a few dishes I found them somewhere here and there, but she was very good at doing one type of kofte. We called it ishli kofte. We called it it was one type of meat dish. And I ate again this in many other restaurants, but I didn't even look for my grandma's recipe. I was just assuming I will never eat again like my grandma. And one day I was in Buenos Aires in Argentina, so we are 10,000 kilometers away. There is no link, there is no obvious geographical or historic link or something. And I go to an Armenian restaurant and I eat, and then I eat the ishli kofte, and it was the exact. I was like, I had goosebumps. It was the exact recipe of my grandma. And then I asked the chef, what is it? What's the story of this dish? And she says that was my grandma that was cooking this ishli kofte. And where was your grandma from? And she said she was from Marash, like my grandma was from. So it was probably the phreatic nap is exactly this. It was 100 years ago, maybe her great-grandma and my great-grandma were teaching in the same town of Marash in Giligia the recipe to their daughters. Then the history and the geography made them go in completely different ways. But 100 years later, I can be the guy eating in the restaurant of the other granddaughter of the other grandma and eating the thing, and I'm like, this is the same. So it's the exact concept of how it's moving.
A universal grandma.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the routes that travel and connect us. You can see the pomegranate being presented everywhere. You heard it in Parajanov's movies earlier. You see it here at the Cultural Center. There's most of the time a parallel made metaphorically about the pomegranate with the Armenian people. And usually they say that the pomegranate is the one of the few fruits that keeps its seeds centered towards the center of the fruit and protected by a hard shell, and it symbolizes the Armenian family. And they also say that during the genocide, this pomegranate was broken to pieces and the seeds have fallen around the world, and wherever one of those seeds landed, like we landed here in Romania, those seeds turn into trees and turn into those networks that connect us. And sadly, we realize that a part of our connections as a nation around the world is through our pain, but also it's a kind reminder that we've managed to survive. As many times we've been tested and broken, we managed to be buried as seeds, but we grew every single time after being buried as seeds.
And yes, another national fruit for Armenians is the apricot. And it's very interesting that the color of apricot, the orange, is the color which could be observed from far. I mean, for the very wandering people like ours, the color which could be observed from far is maybe a sign of the destiny. Or the orange, if you put different colors, the color you can observe is the orange. This is the reason why the destiny made like that, that helped us to recognize each other through the color of orange, which is an apricot for us.
Also, you mentioned apricots. I have to also add to that the Latin word, it's Prunus armeniaca, which is one of the conversations about the roots of this wonderful fruit. But
And the nose. We have big nose, like the island of Easter with big heads. We have big nose. And somebody asked to Radio Yerevan, why the Armenians they have such big noses? And Radio Yerevan answered, Armenians have big noses because the air is free.
also, it was a joke related to noses. Somebody was complaining on social media because there's this whole trend of people doing surgeries to their noses, also in Armenia. And somebody was complaining, people, please stop. We have to recognize each other one way or another.
Charles Navour had such a big nose during his childhood. And Edith Piaf gave to him the advice to make a surgery and to diminish a little bit the curve of the nose. This is the reason why Charles Navour remained in our memory with a small nose, which is not very much Armenian.
The good part of this is that you can do surgery, but your kids, they will keep the Armenian nose.
Yeah.
Surgery don't change genetics, so we're good.
Ruben, now going back to your book, because that's why we're here, and it's really hard to contain three Armenians at a panel with a lot of stories, especially when we're talking about diasporas, because there's so much to cover. But I think one of the things that for me it was interesting, and I didn't get to ask you, which is one of the most shocking or surprising stories during your travels, because you've managed to see 100 communities, which is a lot, because Armenians can be a lot sometimes. They're very loud, as you can see. We were having a sound check there, another concert there, and a panel here. So
surprising, it depends in which way, because you have many kind of surprises. You have the one that's very moving, very strong feeling. You can have like Jerusalem, the Armenian district. It could be the Armenian landmarks in Lebanon, in Syria, when you're in Aleppo, in Beirut. It's like you feel where you go to Deir Zor in Syria, where you have like it was the final extermination place for Armenians during the genocide was Deir Zor in the Syrian desert. So of course it's let's say, I think that this kind of very emotional connection, you can have it in the Middle East maybe, but in terms of surprised, like wow, how did you do that, how did you keep that, I think Latin America is an interesting example, because first because of it's very far away, it's also because they didn't have many connections or many waves connecting them with either Armenia or the political centers or cultural centers of Armenia, like of Armenian culture, like Beirut or Los Angeles or Boston, and they kind of kept well the culture, and they have schools and churches. And okay, something that really impressed me, I'll take the special example in Argentina. So you have already a big and organized community in Buenos Aires and a smaller in Cordoba. So these big cities, they do have schools and churches, but I went to the northern province of Argentina. So it's the jungle. Like basically, Argentina is more like let's say similar to Southern Europe in terms of climate and everything. But the north, no, the north is really like, it's not the Amazonas, but it's similar. It's the real jungle. So with leopards and everything. So I went up there and I got a contact of a contact of a contact of a family. Oh yeah, you have the Tumanian family that lived there since the genocide. It's like an Armenian family there. So I went there and I got to meet this, it's a long story, but I got to meet this Tumanian family. They live they went after the genocide or even just before to Buenos Aires, and they sent them to the Paraná River north, and they settled in like they gave land for free for colons, for immigrants to do the land and everything, but it was very hard to do it. And they went, this Armenian family plus 2 Swiss families, they built everything. So they were showing me, we built these schools and my grandfather built this bridge. It was like nothing was there, and they built everything. And what surprised me is that you go there 100 years after, and one family, they didn't even have much connections with Buenos Aires or something, just one family, because they all had kids and they were all mixed. So at the end, like the little kids, they are all 1/8 Armenian, because they didn't have any other Armenian family to mix with. But they kept the Tumanian name all the time, even when it was through the mother, they gave Tumanian to the kids. And you have a little girl, and she was 6-year-old, and her name was Azadoui. It's an Armenian name. And the father, that's not Armenian, has had a tattoo with Azadoui on his arm. And I was thinking, so imagine if they can do this, no one else has any excuse to lose your Armenian culture. If one family in the middle of the jungle can keep that, and to the point that the 1/8 Armenian little girl has this name. And they were keeping also like old books that they brought they were from Trebizond in Ottoman Empire. So it was impressive, and you feel there is something when you were talking about, like, there is something that connects, something that you feel. What's this kind of energy? I don't know, I don't have words to put on it, but what makes them keep it? You could have totally lost it, like their Swiss neighbors. They don't have any more connection of any kind with the Swiss culture. So it's very interesting. So that was maybe what impressed me the most. This story of this family.
Yeah, I had the same, because you said about the shock. I had the pleasure of meeting Armenians from India at a conference in Armenia, youth conference, and physically I was looking at them and I was trying to find that instant Armenian connection, which I usually feel at the airport. That's where I activate my inner Armenian sensors, and my radar is just scanning noses and eyes. The nose might trick you sometimes, but then there's the nose and then there's the eyes too. The eyes always tell another story.
I want to tell you a story. We are now in 2008. In 2008, the Worldwide Congress of Oil took place in St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, we used to be there around 120 different ministers representing the government from 120 different states. And the Romanian ambassador joined me for the meeting. And I told him, Your Excellency, give me 5 minutes and I will find the Armenian member of the government. 5 minutes. After 3 minutes, I looked to a man and I asked him in Armenian, "You're an Armenian?" He said yes. So, through 120 members of different cabinets, I found the Armenian one after 3 minutes. So, it's something between us, like the immortals, a feeling, a common feeling, impossible to cancel.
Yeah, my example. Yeah, obviously, you started with the example with the connection of the eyes and the nose.
Here, this is a place. This is a place. It's a energy center of Armenians. Between the eyes and the root of nose. Here, it's a very strong place. Is a center of power for us. If you look to an Armenian, you look here, you understand that he belonged to the same people like you.
Yeah, so at this conference, I met 2 youth representatives from India, and I was not connecting in any way. I was looking for that scent, one particle and nothing. I couldn't find anything. And then, why am I saying this? Because we were talking about surprising experiences. I went to them and I said, sorry, "Are you Armenian?" And then they replied in Eastern Armenian, which is my dialect. Yes, and they spoke Eastern Armenian without an Indian accent, and my brain was totally in an error state because I couldn't visually connect with them. But then I was shocked to find out that
Because they have one good thing in India. In Calcutta, they have the Armenian Philanthropic Academy. It's an Armenian school where you have teachers from Armenia, and it's ruled by Echmiadzin, and that's why they keep the education in Eastern Armenian, but they have this institution in India, and but they speak very well Armenian. It's very interesting. The language part is very interesting because there is not only one Armenian. You have Eastern and Western. You have all the little dialects in the East and the West. And I think it's also an interesting, the diversity of the Armenians in general and the diaspora also is something we could work on all, because the difference of all the languages, Western Armenian, for example, many people in Armenia, they don't really know what's Western Armenian. They think it's an extinct dialect or where it's not. And you also, I don't know, you have many, and it's also very useful. I want to point that the topic of is it useful to learn or not Armenian in the diaspora is an important one. And personally, I learned from zero. I didn't know any single word. Like in my family, no one knew, not even Shnoragaluchu, not okay. So people were telling me, is it useful? I'm not saying I'm not a language extremist, because in some cases it's very hard. You cannot. You don't have the numbers, you don't have the teachers, you don't have the schools. It's not a precondition to be Armenian. I'm not saying that. But it's very useful. When I was starting to travel, and it was not even for this project, but I remember I went to Ukraine, and I did learn Armenian, so in Armenia, and I was very young, and people were telling me, why do you spend that much? I spent a lot of hours learning Armenian. Why do you do that? Learn something else, and you could learn German, you could learn Chinese, and it will be much more useful. So I learned it, not because it was useful, but I really wanted it. And in Ukraine, that thing happened. I arrived at the train station, and I wanted to go to the hostel. I knew the address, but it was like 12 years ago at least. So no Uber, no roaming, no phone, nothing. So I just checked in before, and I knew I had to pay around. It was around €4, like 40 grivna back then. And I was okay, asking the taxi drivers, take me for this price to this hostel, and they were like, no. And I was asking in English because I didn't know, it's a Russian-speaking city in Ukraine, I didn't know Russian. And I was asking in English, and they saw me coming, the tourist is here, we'll make him pay 10 times more. They were all saying 400 grivna, like €40 for the price, and I was, no, I know it's not the price. And they were, the taxi drivers, they are like, okay, you don't want to go, you don't go.
we have them too.
Everywhere. And I was, no, I don't want to pay, it's not the right price. And I was like blocked. And then I hear a group of Armenians speaking behind me, and I hear Armenian, and I had learned. So I go to them and I'm like, yes, Francia ihayem, Yevruseren chem khosum, like I'm Armenian from France, I don't speak Russian, and I want to go to the place for the right price. And so the guy first, he didn't understand why I'm Armenian and I don't speak Russian, because to him, like, you have to speak Russian if you're Armenian. But then he was like, okay, ayo, the Rajan, and he took me and he talked with the taxi in Russian, and he said, okay, now you give the normal price. And then he told me, okay, and then you pay the normal price. So I said, then with the Armenian guy coming and telling him in Russian what to do, he just did the normal price. So for everyone that told me, no, don't learn Armenian, it's useless, at least I saved €36 learning Armenian. So it's more than the price of the book to learn. So yeah, language is, and it's also something that it's a big part of the culture. In the language, unfortunately, I'm not good enough to understand poetry or literature, but you can see with the books around, you have like, literature or poetry is part of the culture too, and yeah, language has to be in the part of the package. Like I wish in the future all Armenians everywhere we could have at least a starting pack, with the basics and a bit of the language, a bit of the culture, a bit of everything, all inside and integrated well to the welcoming society. The loyal part is very important too. We are not saying like we want to keep everything and not be part of the society. No, Armenians are always builders. Everywhere they go, they are builders. They do. In the US, you have a lot of patents done by Armenians. They invented a lot of things. You have like the neighborhood in Buenos Aires, Palermo. It used to be a very working class neighborhood. It was like not a nice one. Now it's the nicest neighborhood of Buenos Aires. Bosch Hamoud in Beirut was marsh. It was not. They built it. They built like many things. It's just. The Armenians were thinking, what can I bring to the society?
Because you mentioned the innovative capacity of Armenians, I want to give only one example here in Romania. In Romania, in the health care system, we have Jacob Jakopovic. He was a founder and the Romanian University of Medicine. We have Dr. Bagdasar. He was the first neurosurgeon in Romania. We have Ana Aslan. She was the founder of the geriatric school in Romania. We have Ervan Seropian. He was the founder of the allergology school in Romania. We have Levon Mirahorian, the founder of the parapsychologic school in Romania. We have Krikor Pambuccian, one of the famous anatomopathologists in Romania. So 5 founders of national schools in the healthcare system. Yeah. Thank you very much.
No, it's very interesting, the contribution and the mentality. It's also very that you can find it everywhere. I think Armenian immigrants, when they Armenian diaspora, they are very respectful with the local society. They want to keep their culture, to keep what they are, but they also think, how can I also contribute to the local society in a good way? And it's kind of a thing you see it repeated itself in like. In many other places. At a point in history, you even have examples of you have large scale and small scale, but of local administrators that were doing everything to bring Armenians to push the immigration of Armenians, because they knew that would be good for their economy. For example, the largest example is the creation of the Armenian community in Iran. You had the Shah of Iran, Shah Abbas. He did it in a kind of violent way because it was kind of a forced migration. But he took the Armenians from the Nakhchivan region near Ararat, and he took them to New Julfa, and a big part of the power, the economical power of Persia, at the top of the golden age of Persian history, was because of the Armenian merchants in Isfahan.
Alexander the Good and Stephen the Great, they invited Armenians to establish themselves in Moldavia, and around 20,000 Armenians at that time, they came to Romania, to Moldavia that time, and they opened commercial roads from Lvov to Leipzig.
Yeah, that's. You were talking about Marseille and Venice, and you have Livorno. So in Italy, it was the same story. There were, even between Marseille and Livorno, at some point you had a competition, because Livorno was a free port. They were doing everything to bring merchants, mostly Armenians, but also from the Levant, in Livorno to settle and make the connections. And Marseille at the beginning was saying no, and even in the press, like, we don't want Armenian merchants from the east, and no, it will be specified for French merchants. And when they saw the success of Livorno, they just told the Armenians, no, please come here, and they made a special trade agreement with Armenians, because they saw that it was working very well in Livorno, and they wanted the same in Marseille. And that shows also how this contribution was something, not we are saying it was true. It's like, if you see local rulers doing these trade agreements, it's because they were benefiting from it.
I think secretly everybody knew that Armenian grandmas cook very well, and they just wanted to bring them there. But sure, we'll just say that it was because of the building capabilities. I think the starter pack, you mentioned the language for Armenians in general when they were traveling or migrating to an area. The first thing was building a church to not lose their faith because it was part of their identity. And the second thing was they were building schools. And this is why we had a lot of schools and a lot of churches and monasteries here in Romania. We have monasteries that date back all the way 600 years before today. And if I'm not wrong, we have the oldest with constantly working life monasteries in the entire Europe. They're here in Romania. They're in Suceava. So, and not only one. We have Zamka, we have Haj Qatar, and then there we have Saint Simeon, and a lot of heritage that we've built to not lose our identity.
There is something to do about that, because when I think it was 5 years ago, the first time I came to Romania, and I went to I took a plane. I think I had a plane from Paris to Iași. So I arrived in Iași, and then I was again not speaking Romanian, obviously, and I went to Suceava, Botoșani, Haj Gadar, and I was honestly I was already doing some research, and I had already friends. You know, we were talking sometimes about Armenian culture. So I was not even just not knowing nothing at all, but to me, it was a big shock to see the beauty of Haj Gadar, for example. Like, there is a work, there is a lot of work that has been done by you, Romanian Armenians, for preserving and keeping this heritage. But now there is a job to do for Armenians from outside Romania to come here and see.
You visited Armenopolis and Elisabetopolis.
Yeah.
In Gherla, Armenians built the biggest Armenian church across the world since Surp Vartan in New York and Surp Grigoriu Savorici in Yerevan. So for 300 years, in Gherla and Dumbrăveni, we've had the biggest Armenian church across the world.
That's correct, exactly. I think I remember I've read something. This is a crazy story. No, I think now the let's say the ball in French say la balle est dans le camp. The ball is in the camp of the rest of the diaspora to come here and assist, to attend the festival, to visit Haj Gadar, to visit Gherla, and I think there is my feeling, it's just subjective, but my feeling is like, okay, you are doing a lot of work, guys, here, but no, like the rest of, especially Europe, it's so easy now. You have Wizz Air and Ryanair flights from Armenians from everywhere could come here and visit these places. So there is, I don't know. I hope at my small scale I can do something, but there is really a cultural richness that's in these monuments and these landmarks, and it's in state of being a touristic attraction already. It's not a project. It's, I don't know. So that's also why something I want to do with this book and this project. I even take the Erasmus ID. I already had this ID. Erasmus is the program in Europe. Armenians, young people, students are exchanging, and they're going from France to Romania, from Portugal to Austria, from Belgium to Greece. I'm thinking, when you have all these exchanges and you have a young Armenian from Paris or Marseille, and that's arriving alone as a student in Athens or Bucharest, that we should have an organization that okay, you're going to meet some local Armenians so they can help you finding maybe an apartment or whatever. Touristic destinations. I think, for example, if I have friends in Paris and they're telling me, oh, we go on vacation, we hesitate between Malaga and I don't know, Greece. And I'm saying, no, go to Greece. Well, no, there is an Armenian church in Malaga, so it's a bad example. But okay, Canary Islands and Greece, go to Greece so you can visit the local Armenians. I'm not saying spend your whole week doing Armenian things, but at least once, go to this nice Bastorma place in Athens, and you're gonna know local Armenians, and you're gonna have a local experience connecting you to the place you visit. So.
Yeah, that pretty much works, and I think we're pretty much close to our deadline of our conversation. And you mentioned about the importance, and that the ball is now in your court, in the rest of the communities, to come and visit everything that we've managed to create here in Romania. And also, now that the reason why we have organized this festival is also to pass the ball to the Romanian audience for you to have a taste of what our culture has to offer. And this is just a glimpse of what Armenia and what we have to offer is. And it's an open invitation to travel to Armenia. It's a safe place, it's a welcoming place, and Armenians, even if you enter the poorest family's house, I promise you they will just open their most expensive candy in the house and they will put it on the table and they will definitely serve some freshly brewed coffee for you. So it's an open invitation to...
In the second edition, you have to mention here for Bucharest the Strada Armenească festival, and we are prepared to receive here the Armenians from abroad. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much.
And if those companies, those airlines are watching us, please just prepare a flight from Bucharest to Armenia because we really would need that help.
Oh yeah, that's very. Oh, actually, that would be very, very good, because Armenia is connected with Hungary, connected with Bulgaria in direct flights, with Greece, with Moldova, with everything. Even Moldova has direct flights before COVID.
Yeah.
Before COVID.
Yeah, and then
but- yeah.
COVID ruined everything.
COVID ruined it, but now it has to be back because honestly, that's
Because COVID was not COVID yet.
yeah.
Thank you, Ruben, for being here, and hopefully you managed to experience our community, and we're rooting that you will do your best to present what we have here, this hidden gem of a country, to the Armenians of diaspora. And we're very grateful to everyone that spent those 40-50 minutes here standing and following our conversation. And please feel free to attend, to follow us on social media, find Centru Cultural Armean, the Armenian Cultural Center, because we're probably going to take a little break after the event because we need to recover. But we're going to start fresh in September with a lot of amazing projects. You can visit the Maria Aslan exhibition currently placed at the Cultural Center. And please stay in touch. Reach out to Armenians. Talk to them. We're friendly people and we're here to make you feel welcomed. Although this is your country and your land and your park, we took it over for 3 days and you're our guests. And we really hope that you're going to enjoy tonight's show.
Thank you very much, Rand. Really,
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you to all the organizers and volunteers, because you are doing a very, very, very hard job to make all this happen. So I see a few of them here. Well, thank you very much, and that's really what you do is very meaningful. As organizers, as volunteers, what you're doing here is, I don't even know. Like, we don't see the future. But I know when I'm reading old articles and everything, we can tell that, oh, you know, in the 50s, in the 60s, this festival was launched in Boston and it became the biggest. I mean, I'm sure in 20 years we will look back and see it as a model of Armenian festivals in Europe. And these editions that you are making, it's not just fun or music, it's also history in the making in terms of building the Armenian diaspora in the Romanian Armenian diaspora, and congratulations for that. It's an excellent job.
Thank you. And as an insight for you, our followers, this entire event actually happens with the love and dedication of around 6 or 5 people that work for a few months. And then we have an army of amazing volunteers that just take over the event during the preparation period of a week prior to the event. But although the community or the impact may seem big, the people working behind are just a few, and it all comes from the passion and love and appreciation of what our ancestors left us. And it's our duty to do our best to just keep on presenting the Armenian culture with the old, with the good, with the more rusty, and in a way fresh every single year. So thank you again for being here, and we hope you enjoy tonight's events. Thank you.
Is there, you take questions maybe?
Oh yeah, are there any questions? Although we're slightly late, but are there any questions? if you have questions, please follow.
If you have questions or whatever, you can follow the page. Instagram,
Yeah, you can follow the
Little
Instagram
Armenians.
page because it's also going to be an opportunity to discover the particular communities of Armenians around the world. So, and also,
I'll be here for a while, so you can come if you're also interested by the book. You can come here and have one, and I'm here to answer questions. So, and if you want the book to be signed also or something, so it's totally fine.
thank you very much. Thank you for being here.